Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of this hands and material tutorial. So in the first part we did the initial layers for the hands, and now in this part we're going to do the base layers for the material. And this is kind of going to follow the same method as for the hands. So hopefully it's also going to be around an hour-ish amount of work, basically. So we've got mirror sides, and then we've got this middle bit that's got some of a bow and some wrinkle rouging detail. This is going to be a very nice kind of tutorial on, you know, blending and layering graphite and getting that nice blend and full transitions, especially for these types of textures. It's a very nice way to kind of get this down, and it can easily be applied across other objects, drawings, even fur and so forth. So we are like for the hands, I am going to take graphite powder on a brush, really tap off the excess, and then I am just going to give everything a once off layer. Now I don't mind if I go over where I was busy with the hands, as we haven't done much detail work and it's gonna basically not affect it too much. So once we've got these base layers in, I will kind of work on the whole drawing together and not necessarily break them up into material and hands. As once we've got the base layers in, we basically moving on to the bulk of the drawing work, which is getting our values correct for the details. If you've got a larger fluffy brush, you can absolutely use it, but this is sufficient enough to kind of get the job done. So you just want a nice even layer, and the reason I'm using a soft fluffy brush instead of a blending stump or something that's got more denser compact bristles is just to prevent the powder from kind of being concentrated in one spot, and you get like these little dark spots of powder, and I just want to kind of avoid that. So I use a softer brush with longer bristles, and it works very well. Okay, so step 2, as was for the hands, is going to remain the same for the material as well. Let me just get everything here. So I'm going to use a blending stump, put powder on it, and we're going to use that to kind of build up our areas of shadow, so that this is a lot quicker than pencils, and it also spares your pencils from being used too much. It just gives it a longer kind of lifespan, and like I said, it's a lot quicker, it's easier, it's more efficient, and you also get a nice even layer as well, which is always a bonus and kind of what we want. So if you need more powder, just pick up and tap off the excess. So in these initial layers, we are not necessarily looking for complete accuracy, as that will come as you start to build up your layers and define and refine areas of pencil and powder. And same with the hands, you kind of, as you start removing and adding pencil, you start kind of refining your layers and your shapes and everything. So it's not necessary to be very accurate and precise in this one. Just keep it in the general area where it's supposed to be. And this is where it's very useful, if you do your line work, to just start mapping out where your folds are and areas of shadows, so that it's a lot easier to do this step. So I'm going to skip the middle first and move on to the other side. I'd rather do this with a smaller blending brush or a pencil. So as usual, I kind of leave a line open just between areas until I go in with pencils and erasers to just refine it and also show the correct values between the two spaces. That's just to prevent things from kind of melting together. And I'm just going to got this large brush here. Just going to go over it, these two spaces. Then I'm going to take a smaller one that's a bit cleaner, just for this middle rouging and bow. And we're gonna have to, at some point, kind of maybe in this part, just work a little bit on this area, just to, like I said, still keep the two areas separate, even though the values are quite similar. And these types of folds and kind of types of shadows and highlights, I do quite enjoy drawing these types of things. So I'm going to start in this little middle section. You've seen the first part, we're going to basically stick to the same pencil, so a 2H, a HB, a F. I also used a B and a 3B. Yes. So we're going to kind of stick to these same. They're very close in range, but that's kind of what we want for our base layers. So let's pick up the F pencil. I'm going to, like I said, stick in this little middle section. And as always, you are focusing mainly on your dominant shadow areas that defines the shape and kind of the contours of whatever you are drawing. So we are not focusing on anything else, and kind of as with the hands, your midtones kind of get blended in anyways. So it all kinds of starts to melt together and become rather say everything gets its base layer, but you don't necessarily spend in time on each thing, same amount of time on each thing. So as you blend your highlights and your shadows, you kind of also blend that transitional values as well and add them and also deepen them up as you go along. But you don't necessarily spend any time actually putting pencil to those areas. It's just kind of they get blended. Pencils get blended into those spaces. So I'm just going to take blending stump and just start blending out those areas where you added the pencil. And you also then start where you added and then you blend into the space surrounding it. And that will then become kind of your, for that area, your middle values, everything in between. Back in with my F. And just blend out some more. Then I'm going to take a brush, add some powder. As always, just tap off the excess and give it a blend. So this just acts as kind of also to smooth the area and kind of even out that layer that you've added. So I'm just going to take my mono eraser and just for the highlights, I know this is kind of a place in the shadows, but it will still have highlights. So every area does have the lightest and darkest points, and that kind of just shows off the contours. So it's not going to be as bright as the hands, but it's definitely going to have some. And this just also helps to just refine an area. Okay, so this is my HB, yes. So everything is still very light pressure. We are not really using a lot of hard pressure to really get that depth. Just in kind of those really small areas do you add your pressure, and then you just take it off, and circular motions, and just almost like you are blending really. And then just take your blending stump. I'm going to take a dirtier one. And just blend those areas where you've added the pencil. And you can just take the blending stump into other spaces as well. There we go. And I'm just going to take a brush again, powder, and just blend it all out. So that's all we're going to do now for that. So we're going to focus on these two sides and then go back in and kind of get it up to the same kind of value and layer as the hands. Okay, so I'm going to go straight in with my HB. So I'm going to start here at the bottom and really first just kind of define the space. And here I'm using a little bit of a harder pressure, and also the pencil is sharp, so I don't need to use that much pressure. But because it's kind of a very defined line, I don't mind it. And I'm just going to take a blending stump and just blend that out. So like I said with that initial kind of layer with the blending stump, you just want the general area. Now with the pencil, we are defining the space a bit better. And here I'm just using a line to show the difference between the hand and the material. Don't do it too harshly, as you don't want that line to be very dominant. And then you can also just blend it out, just to be extra sure that it's not going to be very prominent. Same with this line. And because you've got that layer of powder underneath, it just blends the pencils out easier as well. And then those lines already are kind of minimal, so you won't really have that problem too much because you've got that layer of powder underneath, especially for your darker areas. So that's why I like to go in with the powders first to kind of build up that area of shadow, and that just creates a smoother application for your pencils. So I'm just going to take a brush, kind of add another layer of powder before going in with more pencil. And then you can also just take your kneaded eraser and start adding some of the highlights. Like with the initial layer of powder, still not being very precise, as we haven't added too much pencil just yet. And like with the hands, you kind of want to start seeing kind of what your end result would be, but just in more muted values. And then once you've got that, you know you've kind of on the right track. So this is now my F pencil. Actually, let me just give it a sharpen first. And like always, shaft pressure, circular motions. And you don't want too much of an iron grip on the pencil either. Then just take your blending stump and blend out those areas. Then I'm going to take the larger brush with some powder on it. If you don't have a large brush, you can keep just using your smaller one. But I'm just going to use the larger brush powder, just smooth it all out. And then just keep your kneaded eraser in hand and just add some more of those little highlights of the folds. Really not applying a lot of pressure for this. Kind of just, because it's such light layers, it doesn't take much effort to just remove some of that powder, because most of it is still powder. So just going to take the brush again, nothing on it, just to kind of smooth it out. Okay, so we're going to do the same on this side. Let me just move my reference over. This is the HB pencil. We're going to define some of the spaces first. And I'm just going to take a blending stump and just blend that out. If you get to areas where you haven't really applied much, just soften up your pressure and it will just make a light layer. And that's why I like to use the dirtier blending stumps, because it kind of gives you the opportunity to have that kind of more darker application and then also a lighter application. So same as with this hand, we are just going to define the edge as well. And just add a bit of depth. And then just also, as you go, blend it out. Just back in with my pencil and we're just going to continue building up. So I just gave that a bit of a blend and now back in with the pencil and let's define this edge first. There we go. And just give that a blend. I'm going to add another layer of powder with the softer brush. Then I'm going to just take the kneaded eraser as well to just add in a bit of those highlights. Take the big brush, tap off all the excess and just give it a sweep over. And then I'm going to just take my blending stump to do a bit more blending. Yeah. And just add some more depth. So I'm just using the flat edge, and that also just helps quicken up the process. There we go. So now I'm just going to work on kind of these two little gaps. For that I'm going to take my HB, give it a sharpen, and then once I've done that I'm going to go back to this and then to the sides. And then start adding some depth with the 3B and the B pencil. So add your defined line. And obviously this HB looks dark now, but once you start adding more pencil, you're going to have to continuously deepen up this area. I just like kind of going at the depth step by step, rather than putting it in and then later realizing that, oh, I should have probably maybe gone a bit lighter with this, or you know, it's not correctly placed, or it's too big, or it's too small. If it's too small, it's fine, but if it's not correctly placed and it's got the wrong shape, then it's going to be difficult to correct. So I just like going in with kind of the depth step by step and not really adding it, being too heavy-handed in the beginning. So this is my 2H. And I'm just going to use it to fill this gap in no particular way. I just want to give it a grey value. Then I'm going to clean that space up. And I'm also going to clean that space up. There we go. So I'm going to leave that at that for now, and then just move on to this side. Define the edge. So this is much darker and deeper. So just define first and then kind of color in the area. And then just use a blending stump to just give it a blend. And then because this is already nice and dark on the hand side, I'm just going to deepen it up. There we go. So it's not as dark as it's going to be, but it's got a first layer. So then just take your 2H and fill in that space, and also just give that area a blend. So once you start working on the hand and the material at the same time, those types of areas will be done simultaneously because they interact with one another, and you need to do the one with the other to make sure that the values of both things are correct. So let's go down. So let's give this 3B a sharpen. we're going to go back down to our little middle section. So start at your darkest area first, and just like the HB, harder pressure and more precision closer to the edge, and then you just use circular motions to blend it out. And still not a very tight grip on the pencil either, and that just makes sure that I don't apply too much. So you already want to now, in these steps, you don't want to add pencil all over, you kind of want to start working with those very smooth transitions and very slight differences in values. So we will do that with some other pencils and use that to blend into those spaces. And using the 3B, you can kind of start to see what I mean by that. Kind of just focusing on your areas of your darkest areas, and then using other pencils to blend it out. I'm just going to take an F pencil and just do that exact thing, where you start in your area where you applied your darkest pencil, and then you just softer pressure, just start to work that pencil in and blend it into the lighter space. Then you can take your blending stump. I generally like to use something that's a bit cleaner. So you can see the darker, and then it just blends in to a lighter space. And then you can kind of go back and forth between the pencils just to start deepening up or creating a smoother blend. There we go. So we're going to do the same here. F pencil. So the F pencil in this space is not necessarily to blend it into a lighter space, it's more to smooth out that 3B. Where the 3B was applied the most, it will deepen it up, and then it will also, because it's a smaller space, the space will look darker anyways, so you don't need to do too much to it really. And then as you deepen up your values, you just deepen up the space as well. So 2H, I'm going to take my 2H. This is also another way to kind of fill in gaps and smooth out an area of pencil. It won't give a lot of depth, but it will just smooth out that B and just kind of make it deeper, because if the grain of the paper comes through, it's obviously not going to be as dark as it can be. So just by smoothing it out and using another pencil to kind of fill in the gaps, you automatically just deepen up that space anyways. Just take your blending stump, and you can also just go over and blend that out. I'm gonna take, let's take the F pencil again, just for these little triangles. And just, you can fill the entire space with pencil first and then blend, but I kind of like to do it simultaneously, and that just gives me also an opportunity to kind of decide what I'm going to do or where I'm going to go next. So I'm going to go back with my 2H just here by the edge. And this will also just help me refine the area without having to add too much depth in itself. Obviously it looks relatively dark now, but that's just because the surrounding areas aren't really built up to its final values. So I'm just going to take a brush, add some powder, and just smooth it all out. Don't mind going in the hands at all. And then I'm just going to take my mono eraser, just add more depth down there. Now back in with my mono eraser. So just like the hands, I'm going to kind of use it to start showing what texture is going on here. So we're doing that, and then also you can go into areas of light. I'm just going to, for these, just to spare my mono eraser, just use the kneaded eraser as well. So that's kind of the general gist of that area. Let's just give it a blend. Again, I'm going to just take the big brush, there's nothing on it, and then just blend it out. You can also take a bit of your blending stump, very soft pressure, just to smooth out other areas. And there we go. So that's kind of, now you can see it kind of fits into what's going on with the hands. And then we're just going to translate what we did here to the other sides. Well, I've got the 3B. I'm just going to use the 3B here in this little section and there, and then also very lightly, just to add a bit more depth. Okay, so let's start at the top. And I'm going to take my F pencil and just start the top here where we didn't really do much. So this line here is just for the stitching, very much like we did with the leather in the previous tutorial. Not too worried about it just yet, just kind of putting it in, and it's darker anyways, it's not a light, it's more of a line really, so you don't really have to use your mono eraser or anything like that to show it, so I can just make a line for it now. And then later you can just refine it more. So now here by the nail, I'm just gonna be a little more precise. And I'm just going to take clean blending stump first, in between the areas where we've added the pencil. And then I'm going to take a dirtier blending stump for the areas where we did add the pencil. And then go back in with your cleaner blending stump just to blend out the other spaces and blend in between. See, not much effort at all is required. So now I'm going in my HB. I'm going to be turning this a bit so that it's easier to do this line. So I've added the line, then just go back in here. So there is texture on the material. We are completely ignoring it. And we are just focusing on the base values. So I'm going to see, no, that line is not what I wanted. Let me just fill in that gap. And that does sometimes happen. You can't completely avoid it, but there are steps to kind of minimize it. And most of these initial layers are done, especially for a large base like this, are done with your blending stumps. So not at all. You don't really need much pencils. It's just for that real, more close spaces and edges that you need your pencils for. And if you need to add a quick, because the powder only goes up to, I think, 3B or something, just for that extra bit of depth. So this is my F pencil, and we just continuously are adding in our areas of depth and shadow. And then just blend that out. Like I said, you can go over the entire area with your pencil first and then blend out, or you can do it as you go. And then just using the blending stump to fill in those blank spaces. Even up there. And then I'm going to take a brush, just like what I did there for the middle section, add a lot of powder, tap off the excess, add and add as you go. This is going to be very much personal preference on how much you add, or obviously you won't get a lot of depth out of it, but just how smooth you want to get. So that's kind of the general idea, kind of what I want. Just cleaning up my edges as I go. You can obviously mask it off, but I don't bother. And then I'm just gonna keep the kneaded eraser in hand and just add in my highlights. And by now you should be familiar with how the folds work, and you've got your general guide of kind of how they lay and interact with one another. And just like the hands, these initial layers are supposed to be relatively quick and simple. They're not supposed to make you scratch your head and want to start all over. So I'm just going to give that a blend with a brush, and then I'm going to take my 3B just for this bottom section here. And also just to deepen up here by the hand, and then we're going to just blend it out with our blending stumps into our space. So just like we did in this little small corner here, I'm going to take the 3B and then just use the F pencil to blend it out and also just bridge the gap. I just prefer doing it that way. And then we're just going to take the F pencil and then blend it out again. Now we're going to do it on this side. Just move my reference over. F pencil first. And the stitching also. Just add a line. And then let's just take the HB and define this bottom line. There we go. And you're gonna just blend it out. also blend out into the spaces where you didn't add pencil, but only with light pressure and after you've kind of already went into that area where you added the pencil. That way you've got something on your stump to kind of add there. Now I'm just going to take a brush, tap off the excess, and then just go in and go over and smooth it all out. There we go. And then just take your kneaded eraser and start taking away some of the areas of highlights. Just going to take my larger brush, I'm going to add a little bit of powder and then just go over. There we go. So that's our base layers for everything done. Let me just move my light a bit off the drawing. So that's basically what we are going for. There you can see some of the more true values. But that's our base layers for both our hands and the materials done. So from here we're going to work on everything together to build up that middle part, making everything ready for our details. So this in total for the base layers part 1 and part 2 is about 2 hours plus work, so not actually a lot. I don't think this is going to take me too long. That obviously just depends on how everything goes and whether or not I can get my values in the first time the way I want it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you for the next one. Cheers!